also love old men, like big, strong, bad men in anime. I mean, don't be getting any wrong ideas here, but who's cooler than the Gorosei? And ever since I saw these 5 legends all the way back in chapter, what was it, like 233, I knew that they were not to be messed with. I mean, look at them. They had battle scars, they had legendary swords, and even though a lot of the One Piece fanbase said that these guys were gonna be nothing more than some government bureaucrats for years farting into their seats, I did know in my heart of hearts that the 5 elders would be able to throw down some punches. And boy, haven't we been eating in Egghead Island, because we finally get to see what the Gorosei are really all about. And so today I want to break down with you everything that you need to know about the Gorosei and their crazy powers, because now that we're in the final saga, we're about to be seeing a whole lot more of these heads of the world government than we originally were, starting with what we know about them as a kind of a collective and group, and then we're going to be breaking down each individual member with each of their individual roles and powers as well. So, the Gorosei, or in Japanese the Gorosei, the 5 elder stars / 5 elder planets as we now know, all have unwavering loyalty to Imu, which is the secret king of the entire world government. But really, for all intents and purposes, as far as the general public knows, there is no higher authority in the entire One Piece world than these 5 dudes here. And since we know that Oda loves to weave real history and mythology into the story, these guys could actually have a real-life inspiration as well. They could be based on the 5 permanent members of the United Nations or the Council of 5 Elders from feudal-era Japan, both of which are fairly possible and likely. Or maybe Oda just loves burgers and these guys are actually named after the 5 guys. Their primary responsibility is to carry out Imu's will and, from what I can tell, protect his identity and existence at all costs. And the same really goes for any secret information about what happened during the Void Century. And anyone who finds out this information, whether by accident or on purpose, immediately goes on their please kill instantly list. And it doesn't really matter who you are. Imu's gonna getcha whether you're Professor Clover, Sabo, or really whoever else. However, in addition to safeguarding government secrets, they're also concerned with balancing the powers between the Marines, the Warlords, and the Yonkos, seemingly in order to prevent the world from descending into complete chaos, and hasn't that been going really well for them? So hey, maybe they're not so bad after all, is what I would have said before they then transformed into terrifying looking demons. But we will be getting into those transformations in just a moment. Now, their connection to Imu is more than just obedience though, because as far as we can tell at least, Imu seems to grant them some truly crazy powers too. They have some sort of telepathic connection to one another, they're able to travel through the demonic summoning circles known as the Abyss here, just like the God's Knights, and they can't be harmed by conventional methods, so hopefully Luffy's due for an upgrade in the near future as well, or else he's gonna be in some real trouble the next time he comes face to face with any one of these. Not to mention, we do know that they've got some truly insane Haki abilities that can actually go up against Yonko level characters like Luffy. Oh yeah, and apparently they're straight up immortal, because we have seen the Gorosei in the Ohara flashback many decades ago, and they don't seem to have appeared to have aged a single day. But more than just that, we also saw Saint Saturn at God Valley and in Marijua 200 years ago during Emma's assault, and he looked straight up exactly the same. Oh, and did I mention their crazy beastly transformations? Oh, I did? Okay, cool. All right, cool. We'll get to that. Here's another fun fact. The 5 elders are the characters with the longest gap between their character introduction and their name reveals in all of One Piece. I've never been so hyped just to find out the names of some old dudes. Don't read into that statement again, please. But speaking of those names, let's now get into each and every one of them. And I'm gonna start with the elder that we know the most about at this point, Saint J. Garcia Saturn. As we'll see, each elder is gonna be named after a planet, hence the name 5 elder planets. Back in the day, all the One Piece OGs called them the 5 elder stars, since the Japanese term, Gorosei, like the sei, the kanji, can be used for both celestial bodies, both stars and planets. But since we now got the reveal of their actual names and found out that they're actually all named after planets, which orbits around a central figure like Imu, or who knows, the sun got, no, this is too much. My theorist brain couldn't quite help making some connections to Vegapunk and his satellites as well. So is it possible that the Gorosei are even more connected to Imu than it really seems? But I am already drifting into theory territory, and this is supposed to be an explainer video, so let's stick with that. Saturn holds the position of the warrior god of science and defense. Every one of the 5 elders has a warrior god's title and governs some aspect of the entire world's affairs. And since Ekid Island, of course, specifically deals with science and the smartest man in the world, Dr. Vegapunk, we got to see a whole lot of Saturn, specifically how he tortured Bartholomew Kuma for the duration of pretty much his entire life. On God Valley, he confronted Kuma about how he deserved his life of slavery since he was a buccaneer and the buccaneers had committed some grave crime in the past. My money is personally on tax evasion. And then he went on to perform highly unethical science experiments on Kuma's soulmate Ginny, giving her and her daughter Bonnie, which, might potentially just be his daughter, the sapphire scale disease. A deadly disease so severe that Vegapunk could only treat it in exchange for Kuma giving up his free will and agreeing to become a cyborg and weapon of the government. All Saturn's idea, of course. I think that goes without saying. Man, this guy really sucks. I really hope that he gets what's coming for him someday. But back to some other wild facts about Saturn. Am I the only one who thought of the Grateful Dead when, we got his name reveal? Jay Garcia? Like Jerry Garcia? And I gotta be honest, before we learned the other Gorosei's names, I personally seriously was hoping that they'd all be named after rock stars, but you can't always get what you want. I mean, just tell me you wouldn't want to see what Saint Shepherd Nickelback can do or something. I don't know, bad example. But speaking of real-world inspirations for these world leaders, all of their designs do actually seem to be based on real-world leaders that have existed in history. Now, as you'll see, some of these are pretty straightforward and some are a little bit more ambiguous. In Saturn's case, there are pretty much 2 strong possibilities, I think. His general shaggy appearance with his beard and hair are kind of reminiscent of Karl Marx, but I think maybe an even more accurate representation would be the Italian general Giuseppe Garibaldi, who had the exact same type, of head and the cane as well. So that might have been the inspiration here. Of course, Oda would never be satisfied with just some historical references though. He's gotta get some, legendary mythology in here as well. Now, fun fact, in Hindu astrology, the planet Saturn is personified in the god Shani, I think that's how you hopefully pronounce that, who's also represented by the sapphire gemstone. Like a sapphire scale. But I don't know. You didn't just come here for a totally rad history and mythology lesson, and if you did, my salutes to you, but you probably came here to hear all about how these elders can transform into absolutely terrifying demon monster yokai, and each one of them can transform into something resembling a mythical zone awakening. Because all of them have the same cloud sash that we see in other awakened zones like Luffy and Lucci. However, interestingly enough, Oda never in the first place gave us any confirmation of their fruit's name or that they even have devil fruits, so it's still very much possible that their transformations straight up come from another mysterious source, such as maybe Imu themselves. What we do know for sure though is that Saturn's transformation turns him into a yokai called a Gyuki, which is this wicked combination of an ox and a spider that's known for its poisonous abilities and spreading incurable diseases to all who see it. That kind of checks out with his acidic spider legs that, corrode everything they touch, as well as giving Ginny sapphire scale. Did I mention that? Also, he made that random marine's head explode, so that's pretty cool and kind of just screams that the world government are the actual good guys here and deeply misunderstood. But it's also probably worth mentioning that no marine at the rank of Commodore or below are actually permitted to have an audience with the Gorosei or especially see their top secret beastly transformations. As we see here, they do that at risk to their own safety and health. I mean, just ask Captain Head Explosion over here. He will tell you, or he would have told you, not a good idea. And also heading into real manga spoiler territory now, so skip ahead to the timecode here. He's not the only man who met a truly horrifying death. RIP Saint Saturn, you never made it out of Ekid Island. Ha, who knew? Now, for the high crime of failing his mission at Ekid, Imu revoked both your Gorosei privileges and, well, your being alive privileges, I guess. Because in another great piece of evidence that the Elder powers are directly connected to Imu, he was just able to suck the life force right back out of Saturn until he was nothing but bones and a bit of ash, and was even able to do this remotely like from across half the world. So I guess no more immortality perks for you, Jay Garcia. And we will be getting to the new warrior god of science and defense in just a moment, but now it's time for the man who's always front and center, the top man, if you will, Saint Top Man Mercury, the warrior god of justice. And I gotta say, it's kind of unclear to me if he sits in the middle usually because he's like the leader, or if it's more like the school cafeteria and a few hundred years ago all the Gorosei just picked their seats arbitrarily and that's where they've been sitting every single day for hundreds of years, and because that is my seat and no one sits in my— Now who would have thought, but Mercury is named after the planet Mercury, of course, and his appearance is based on Mikhail Gorbachev of the Soviet Union. Mr. Mercury, tear down that red line. Now, his yokai transformation isn't even a yokai, strictly speaking. It's a yaoguai, which is just the Chinese word for yokai, I guess. More specifically, Saint Mercury transforms into a fangxi. I'm butchering a lot of words, I think. A massive four-tusked boar. Now, traditionally, a fangxi has two heads and the ability to conjure rain. Mercury hasn't been shown to have any rain-based abilities so far, but Mercury is often associated with the element water, so there is still a pretty cool connection between these two elements. As you'll be seeing, Oda is really cooking with all of these characters, and unlike Saturn, who really got to play his role as the main villain of Egghead, the other Gorosei haven't spent as much time in the spotlight, so it's kind of already onto our next contender, Saint Marcus Mars. Mars is the warrior god of the environment, old hippie, and his appearance seems to be based on an 1800s Japanese politician named Itagaki Taisuke, who led the freedom and people's rights movement, back almost 300 years ago. And I mean, come on, like that mustache is just a dead giveaway, am I right? Saint Mars' beastly yokai form is the Itsumade, a bird-like creature with some snake mixed in it for good measure, because that's pretty cool. And his Itsumade form can also fire off crazy energy blasts out of his mouth, which is very fitting since the planet Mars is often associated with the classic element of fire. But come here, do you know what's also fire? The Ohara Patreon, where you can see bonus videos, get early access to content, and download some of the awesome artwork that my team creates for all of these videos. Every single dollar that you spend there goes right back into making better videos and then bonus stuff and bonus content for you as well. So if you would like to help out the channel and get some cool perks, go check it out and I'll hopefully see you over there. But with the bills being paid, now next on to our next elder, where we've got Saint Ethan Baron Venus Juro, the warrior god of Cha-Ching Finance, who, by the way, is the only character known by a middle initial that is not the letter D. Pretty fitting because a long time ago, Nazjuro actually said that the D means danger, which is probably figurative, because if Luffy can actually bust out the line, danger is my middle name, a lot of people I think are gonna be pretty big mad, even though it would be objectively kind of funny for Oda to do so. So I guess now I'm on team, like, Monkey Danger Luffy. Anyways, back to the Gorosei. He's named after the planet Venus, and in Chinese astrology, the planet Venus is associated with the element of metal and gold, fitting his status as the warrior god of Cha-Ching.
I'm looking for a man in finance. Trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
And come on, you already know which historical figure Nazjuro actually looks like. It's Mahatma Gandhi, of course. Though I might say that he does have a little bit of Dalai Lama maybe thrown in there for good measure. I don't know. Like, this man right here was the main reason that I knew all the way back in their introduction that the Gorosei could be fighting, because surely this blade isn't just gonna be for show, right? In fact, Ethan Baron's blade is not just some ordinary old boring sword. It bears all the hallmarks of a Kitetsu blade and is very, very likely the supreme great blade, the Shodai Kitetsu, that Zoro would probably want to get his hands on. Interestingly enough, this sword also grows in size to scale with him when he transforms into his yokai form, but that could just be Oda's, usual playing around with sizes and scales and less of an actual power of the sword itself, but again, who knows, it could be. Speaking of his yokai form though, this obscure creature is called the Bokatsu. It's a skeletal horse that looks like it just comes straight from hell pretty accurately, and rounding out the OG Gorosei is this deceptively looking young man called Saint Shepherd Jew Peter, the warrior god of agriculture. Ooh, good fields. I feel like I would want to be the warrior god of agriculture and then just plant corn on every single island in the entire One Piece world. That would be my evil plan. Yes. That being said, he is my least favorite, you know, solely on the principle that he's not a silver fox. I mean, show of hands, who else, you know, has been a One Piece fan long enough that you remember all the fan theories that this dude was actually Sanji's dad before we then learned about the Germa Kingdom? Low-key, I still kind of wish that had panned out, but at least we've got the fascist Power Rangers instead, so, you know, that counts for something in my book. And also, dude, I've got to admit to you, Saint Shepard feels like an odd one out among all the other Gorosei. First off, he looks significantly younger than everybody else. Now, of course, with Imu's immortality hacks, for all that we know, he is the oldest of all of them, which would be like a classic fantasy trope. But while all the rest of the 5 elders transform into yokai, Jupiter transforms into a massive sandworm. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some mythical creatures kind of like this all over the world, like the Mongolian death worm, which sounds sick, or the Greek Indus worm, but there is notably not a creature from Japanese or Chinese mythology like the others. Also, the timing of this reveal was just beyond funny because the manga release was timed pretty perfectly with the release of the Dune Part 2 movie, which prominently features the giant sandworms of Arrakis, so we kind of really have to ask ourselves here, is Oda just a big Dune fan? I mean, it could be. May thy hockey chip and shatter, I guess. But what we do know for sure, though, is that a sandworm that can burrow through the earth lines up pretty well with being a warrior god of agriculture. You know, till the soil and stuff. Moreover, the planet Jupiter is associated with the wood element in Chinese astrology, which also connects really well with agriculture too, I would say. And continuing that theme, we do have to talk about Saint Shepard's relative from the Elbaf arc, Saint Shepard Summers, the God's Knight who ate the thorn fruit because, you know, plants, farming, agriculture. Well, it's all connected, bro. The themes are strong. But sometimes Peter here likes to kill plants, not grow them. Specifically, he really hated Professor Clover because he's the elder who gave Spandine the order to shoot Professor Clover on Ohara before he could reveal the name of the ancient kingdom. Now, another aspect of Shepard that doesn't really line up with his coworkers is the historical basis for his appearance. And by that I mean there isn't really one to pick out here. I mean, some people, including me in a past video, have said that he does look like a young Abraham Lincoln, a little bit maybe, but now that we have Hamburger, the king of the Bollywood kingdom, by the way, who really looks like Lincoln, not so sure anymore. However, he does share his literal name with a historical figure, Saint Peter of the early Christian church. And you know, this fact combined with all the other strange inconsistencies between him and the remaining Gorosei could point to him being a potential traitor among the 5 elders. You know, the Jew in his name? Could it be referencing Judas, the disciple who betrayed Jesus, or, you know, just the Jewish identity of Jesus and his disciples? But just looking at Saint Peter here, he was crucified by the Roman Emperor Nero, who went a little bit insane, and Imu's probable family name, Nerona, is potentially based on Nero as well. Now, is Oda once again dropping us some god-level foreshadowing here? Could Saint Shepard Jupiter actually be a good guy? You know, the whole ordered Clover to be killed thing would suggest not, but we'll just have to wait and see. And actually, another couple of interesting facts about these 5 original Gorosei is that all of their transformations are associated with some kind of domesticated livestock animal. Nazjuro is a horse, Saturn is an ox or cattle, Mars is a bird or poultry, Mercury is a boar or a pig, and yeah, I mean, you don't really see a lot of giant sandworm farms around, but you do see silkworms, since the trade of silk has historically been insanely important for the entire Asian economy. Ever heard of the Big Worm Road? I mean the Silk Road? No? Well, you gotta start paying attention in history class, man. What are you doing? You're watching this. I want you to watch this video, but also pay attention in history class. Also, they're obviously named after planets, but specifically, they're named after the celestial planets that could be seen by the naked eye still during ancient times. And it just so happens that the other 3 more recently discovered planets all share their names with the 3 ancient weapons. I mean, You have to swap Poseidon for Neptune, but you kind of get the idea here. It's like the Greek name of the same god. Pluton equals Pluto, and then there's Uranus. You know, that way we have all the planets except for Earth, which I personally would like to think is represented by Emu since they rule the entire world, and we have speculated before that they may be the original Earth god. And then if you have Luffy as the sun, that just leaves one really important celestial body, which brings us to the moon. And big manga spoiler again here, skip ahead if you don't want to see this. The newest member of the Gorosei, Saint Vigilant Garling. The man so committed to representing the moon that he literally grew his own hair and beard into the shape of a crescent one. And on the topic of his hairdo, did you know that Oda confirmed that if he didn't trim it, his beard and hair would eventually just perform a perfect circle? Which is maybe not that relevant, but I gotta say I love it, and you just gotta love these random SBS corners that, you know, the question corners that Oda does. Anyways, Saint Vigilant Garling took over as the new warrior god of science and defense, replacing our dearly departed J. Garcia Saturn. And we haven't seen him in action with his new role just yet, but we do know something about his former position. You see, until very recently, Garling was the commander of all the Gods Knights, and he's been a God Knight for several decades at this point, as previously he was declared the champion of God Valley after participating in the Celestial Dragons' not cruel at all, totally normal native hunt there and slave hunt there, and presumably winning the Twisted Contest in a super morally not questionable way. Now, as a God's Knight, he was in charge of prosecuting crimes that occurred between members of the Celestial Dragons, as we see when he literally executes Don Quixote Mostgard for the crime of actually being a nice dude for a change as one of the Celestial Dragons. And I kind of feel like I'm forgetting something important here. Let's see, weird haircut, God's Knight, what could it be? Oh! Yeah, by the way, he's Shanks' dad. No big deal. He's also Shanks' twin brother Shamrock's dad, because that's how twins work, I found out. And in the chaos of God Valley, there was a big baby mix-up, probably, and somehow Shanks ended up with Roger's crew, probably being hidden in a treasure chest, while Shamrock was raised by his father to become a God Knight as well. And he then even took over the family business as the God's Knight's new Captain Commander. Now, as for Garling's powers, we don't really know anything about that quite yet. I mean, we do know he's very tough enough to hold his own at God Valley, even with beasts like Roger, Garp, the Rocks pirates running around. But now that he's been promoted, is he about to get a crazy yokai transformation for himself? Only time will tell. I personally can't wait to see this man in action, but to get to him, the Strides are gonna have to get through the Marine Admirals first. And so if you're curious how powerful these guys are, you can brush up on all the Admirals' lores, powers, and backstories in this video I've prepped for you right here. Otherwise, as always, thanks for watching, and a big thanks to all my Patreons right here for making all of our content possible, and I will see you in the next one, and yeah, bye.